I just got done watching the Pier Morgan interview of Alex Jones. Oh my God, this is hilarious. I suggest anyone to watch this. I think Pier Morgan finally found someone who is pro Second Amendment that he can make look like a nut job. And even then, it didn't stop Alex Jones from being right. As high strung as he is, as manic, bipolar as he seems at times, Alex Jones made a very interesting point. Pier Morgan was like, well, gun violence is less in Britain, and Alex Jones is Alex Jones goes, well, yes, of course you have less gun violence in Britain. You don't have any guns, but your violent crime is worse in the U.S. And he's right. I mean, statistically speaking, the UK has worse violent crime than the U.S. does. We have more gun crime in the U.S. Yes, I know. Unfortunately, more people die from being beaten to death with their bare hands, choked, stabbed, bludgeoned with baseball bats and other instruments than they do die from guns. And, even in that case, the situation is that in the UK they have more violent crime. More rapes, more robberies, more muggings, more beatings than what we have in the U.S. We have more people getting shot, yeah, but they have more violent crime overall. And Alex Jones was quick to point this out, and I mean, even as crazy as he seemed, and as high-strung as he seemed, he still kept, beating Pier Morgan with facts. Which gets me into this other little gun rights issue. I'm going to bring something up. For those of you who don't know a lot about history, at the time that the Founding Fathers put in the Second Amendment, they essentially said that, they didn't say anything. They just simply said that the right to bear arms shall not be infringed. Or actually, to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. To keep means to have. To bear means to use. Arms means weapons. It's not restricted to simply guns, but knives, swords, spears, flails, maces, whatever. They're all weapons. There's no distinction between any type of weapons. They never made that distinction. There's not a distinction between small arms and ordnance, which is actually considered big arms. They're all arms. And they're all weapons. So that's there. Another important issue to remember when you're talking about the Second Amendment is the preamble to the Bill of Rights. I hate it when everybody wants to get in there and talk about a stupid little comma or parenthesis in the Second Amendment. Let's make something perfectly clear. The preamble to the Bill of Rights states, plain and simple, that the Bill of Rights is there to protect against misconstruction and abuse of it's referring to the Constitution, but to protect against misconstruction and abuse of its powers. Now, since it refers to the Constitution, and the Constitution is what establishes the power of the government, here's what we have. To protect against misconstruction and abuse of government power, certain declaratory clauses have been added. This is your right to petition the government for redress of grievance. This is your right to peaceably assemble, freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of religion. Beyond all of those comes the Second Amendment, which is your right to own and your right to use weapons. The Second Amendment is about, honestly, killing your politicians in self-defense. I have to include that little thing there, in self-defense. But it is your right to shoot your politicians, your police officers, essentially to go to war with your own government. Now, a lot of people will be like, but nowhere in the civilized world would they ever suggest, except for, let's start talking about the Supreme Court of the United States of America. The U.S. Supreme Court has said in the case of Bad Elk versus the U.S. and several other cases which coincide with this, that false arrest is the same as assault and battery. That anyone who has a right to, everyone has a right to resist false arrest, to resist assault and battery, of which false arrest is. And therefore, you have the right to resist a false arrest by any means necessary, The same way you have a right to resist assault and battery by any means necessary, up to and including the killing of a police officer, which is why an individual by the name of John Bad Elk had killed a police officer in the course of being falsely arrested. And on appeal, since it went to federal court, being it was on an Indian reservation, it went through the Supreme Court of Appeals, all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, where they said he had the right to defend himself against a false arrest. Now, since then, certain other declaratory clauses have been added, stating the whole issue of good faith, bad faith. And here's the problem. So what it runs down to is that you have to prove the officer acted under with malicious intent of bad faith. Now, well, I can get up here and talk about my case. How we have 7 years of bullshit, and I have people on video, on recordings on YouTube, threatening me and bringing false charges and everything else. And we can point out I do actually technically do have a right to resist arrest in those cases, which actually goes back to pretty much the entirety of my legal trouble. But we're not going to do that because certain people might kind of consider that too much of a threat to use lethal force. And I'm not. If I wanted to use lethal force, I would have done it years ago. The simple fact of the matter is that the Supreme Court has upheld that I have a right to kill police officers who falsely arrest me. And by that same standard, I should have a right to defend myself against misconstruction and abuse of government power in the way of laws which violate my civil rights, which criminalize my rights as an American citizen, such as this assault weapons ban bullshit and everything else, which is justifiable grounds for the civil war that these liberal idiots are about to invoke, should they actually pass this assault weapons ban. As scary as that sounds, that's exactly what it comes down to. My hair is just atrocious. Shouldn't wear a hat, but oh well. Now, the fact of the matter is, this is as clear-cut and as simple as it's going to get. And, we have a right to resist abuse of government power and misconstructions of government power, to the point that we can use lethal force if so necessary. Now, that is our right as an American citizen. We are the greatest country in the world because of that right. Because we are the only country where the government, within the framing of the laws which established our government, said, you have the right to defend yourself even against the government itself. They didn't declare a divine right to rule. They didn't declare that God had reached down from heaven and passed a divine right to rulers. They simply said that you have a right to happiness and freedom and a responsibility to protect it, and they gave us the right to bear arms so that we could maintain the responsibility of defending freedom. Not just in the military, not just serving in a war, but in patriotism in what we do here in our nation. Now, America is the greatest country in the world because of that. One of the interesting thoughts that came up there between the Alex Jones, Pier Morgan little diatribe was Morgan getting up there saying, well, are you saying you're afraid the government's going to come and take away your rights and da-da-da-da-da? And you know what? Hitler did it. Stalin did it. Mao did it. Yes, I'm afraid. My personal experiences with the West Virginia State Police, damn fucking skippy. I don't think it's the whole government that is criminal and corrupt. But there are certain factions within. There are certain groups within, certain people within. The simple fact of the matter is, that's why we have a right to defend ourselves against abuse of government powers. So that no group of people, no family, no anyone can come in and say, we're taking over simply because we have the guns, because everyone else does. Now, you might have, your army, and that's fine. You might have, the jackbooted thugs that you have that you expect to come in and do something. That's cool. But here's the point I'm going to make. You cross that line here in America, I'm by no means the biggest, baddest thing out there. when they declared that all veterans were potentially terrorists, they weren't attacking all veterans. What they were doing is they were using a broad stroke pen to paint all veterans as potential terrorists, because since the JFK era, under JFK himself, the charter of the United States Special Operations, U.S. Special Forces, USOC, actually U.S. Special Operations Command, which handles Navy SEALs and PJs, and now Marine Special Forces, MARSOC, which came about in 2003, I believe. Now that these special operations units are out there, they are still under the charter of that was created originally under JFK. And that is that in case our government ever turns rogue, or we're invaded for whatever reason, that these special forces soldiers, including these retired veterans who were part of the SOCOM, Special Operations Command, are to teach the civilian population to rise up and fight, to defend themselves. JFK, the president, who got up there warning us about these secret cabals of corruption and everything else that would take away our rights and abuse us and make us slaves, got up there and put in a specific little doctrine. And to put my tinfoil hat on for a minute and get up here and say, well, let's look at all the craziness that's happening. The easiest way to discredit these people is to attack all veterans in general. Not because if you go in here and say, well, the potential for special operations soldiers to be terrorists, you're going to piss off a lot of people. And you don't want to piss off the special operations guys, because they're the guys who are doing the dirty work, that are keeping the skeletons in the president's closet and the operational closets and everything else. When you start doing that, they buck on the system, and you don't want them bucking on the system. And, well, so the easiest way to do it is to declare all veterans potentially terrorists because they have military training. And here's the thing about it. Have you ever noticed they never targeted the police? I mean, think about it. The police, especially police officers with SWAT training, SWAT snipers, stuff like this, guys who are trained out of the military doctrine, have just as much training and are just as much of a threat as the military. Actually, more so, since they have connections and inside knowledge as to the security procedures and everything else. So, by the same standard that the military would be considered potential terrorists, so would these veteran police officers, not just veteran military. Except the only difference in the two is that under JFK, Special Operations has the charter so that all enlisted members of the Special Operations family, regardless of branch, has to be willing to go out and train the civilians to wage a guerrilla war against their own government if necessary. Just an interesting little thought. Maybe there's something coming of this. I don't know. But it seems to me that these people actually want to fight to try to justify the idea of taking away my Second Amendment rights, or take away the rest of my rights once they try to take away my Second Amendment rights, and it has me worried. And a lot of little dots that haven't been mentioned connect here, and especially the fact that you have cases like Bad Elk versus the U.S., where the United States Supreme Court has said I have a right to kill police officers who falsely arrest me. Though, yes, they've come in later on and said, well, you have to prove that they're acting in bad faith. Well, okay, if I resist a false arrest, kill a cop, get arrested, and then looking at the false arrest, it comes out in trial that they acted in bad faith, that's a burden of proof on me. Of course, in this current situation that I'm in, I have 7 years of proof of bad faith. And, well, precedents.